We've said it a few times here on the show already, but I'll go ahead and say it again. After an incredible performance in the blue and white game, Kentucky has one of the best backcourts in the nation.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what is going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on in to Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, writer for Sports Illustrated for various SEC-related things. But on this podcast, we take a dive into all things Kentucky athletics. On today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be recapping Kentucky basketball's incredibly fun blue and white game. Going to talk about the different individual performances that we really liked. We're also going to talk about maybe some of the negatives that we might have taken away from this game, because there are some concerns that you and I should be aware of heading into this season. But overall, I think it's going to be a pretty positive episode. We've also got more bold predictions from you guys, going to give your hot takes on the upcoming season, and then I'm going to grade them on a scale of 1 to 10. How I see fit. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everybody out there that we are free and available on all platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, would really appreciate it if you subscribe to the show. If you're listening on podcast, please subscribe there as well. So let's go ahead and get into it. UK, the blue and white game. The blue team defeats the white team 100-89. I think the first thing that we need to talk about here before we get into the individual performances, I said one of the things I was going to be looking for in this game was team defense. There was not a whole lot of that in this game. I understand why. We talked about that heading into it, is that I would like to see team defense, but I don't necessarily know if that's conducive to the environment that this glorified scrimmage will create. And I did not end up seeing a lot of great team defense. The broadcasters at different times were talking about how there was a lot of not necessarily a lot of strong fighting through screens or different things like that, where I think the team was very anticipatory when it came to what each offense was trying to do. But at the same time, it's not like they were trying to go out there and get themselves hurt. And whenever it came to leaving shots open, sometimes things just happened. I really do hope that is just an inter-squad scrimmage type of issue here. And that's not something we're going to be talking about for the rest of the season, that Kentucky can't guard the three-point line, Kentucky can't do these different things, and they allow shots to be tossed up that should at least be contested. I hope that the defense is better than what we saw on Saturday. Again, obviously, I think that it's going to be, because this was the situation here, but we'll just keep an eye on it. I think the thing that we need to talk about past team defense, you saw it, I saw it. I was very impressed with the performance of somebody that we got to really talk a lot about this offseason, that has now kind of slipped through the cracks and become kind of somebody that you talk about in the secondary rotation for the Wildcats, Rob Dillingham. So you and I talked about the recap of Kentucky basketball's offseason here just a few episodes ago. And something that we discussed on that episode was a conversation that we had quite a bit earlier on in this offseason about Rob Dillingham and DJ Wagner. I continued to maintain the stance that I thought back in, I think, March and April, that Kentucky was going to start Rob Dillingham at the point, and they were going to play DJ Wagner off the ball, because I really liked what Dillingham brought to the table as a point guard. I think he created his own shot very well. I thought he really brought a fun, creative pace to the offense. He distributed very well, and he was kind of like a chaotic type of player that I really enjoyed watching. He made really tough shots. He distributed the ball well. I thought that he was going to be a really fun player to watch for UK at that point guard spot. And then we learned that DJ Wagner, the player that's kind of more, I would say, slower paced and a little bit more under control whenever it comes to what he's trying to do, albeit both are just as talented as each other and very good at individual things. DJ Wagner is probably going to get the nod at point. But Dillingham showed out, and I continue to maintain the stance that he was going to be a good player in this rotation, and I've continued to say, look, you've got players like Reed Sheppard that are going to push him for playing time, and that's going to be difficult for him to handle because Sheppard in his own right is a good player. Didn't play very well in this game. We'll get to that in a second. Rob Dillingham, though, 40 points on 14 of 23 shooting. He also made 9 of 12 free throws, 3 of 7 from behind the arc. 5 rebounds, 7 assists, only 3 turnovers to those 7 assists, and 1 personal foul, played all 40 minutes of the game. Woo! Rob Dillingham, if he is able to get his chance to start at some point this season, and he is able to get his opportunity to kind of lead this offense, he could end up being a very serious bucket getter for Kentucky. Now, I do want to say this about these individual shooting performances and then also the performance as a whole. You're not going to see Kentucky do exactly what they did here in this blue and white game for the rest of the season. Rob Dillingham's not going to go 14 of 23 and drop 40. He's not even going to drop 30 at any point this season, at least I don't think. But you are going to see kind of a fluctuation between good and bad games, and I think you got to see that on both sides here with the blue and the white team when it came to their shooting. We'll get to that in a minute. But Dillingham individually, I think he's going to end up being a really good player for the Wildcats, and I really, really hope if he is the backup point guard this season, I don't know how they're going to do that rotation by a minutes per game basis, but if he is the backup, I hope he comes back next year, because if Wagner goes and he declares for the draft, Dillingham could absolutely come back one more year and pilot a really, really fun offense with Reed Sheppard then stepping up at the 2. I think that would be, and then you have guys like Boogie Fland on the wing. That could be a very, very fun team that Kentucky has. Somto Cyril coming in as kind of like a very physical player. I think that could absolutely be a really fun team. So Rob Dillingham, props to him for showing out. Props to him for playing really well in this one. I was very impressed with what he had to do in this one. The second thing I want to get to here is the shooting from Kentucky basketball. So you look at the blue team stats, and I just want to run through these teams here real quick. You've got Rob Dillingham, Adu Thiero, Reed Sheppard, Joey Hart, Jordan Burks, and Walker Horn on the blue team. And then you've got Justin Edwards, Tre Mitchell, Antonio Reeves, Brennan Canada, DJ Wagner, and Kareem Watkins, and Grant Darbyshire as well on the white team. And if you want to guess here which of those two teams shot better from beyond the arc, it's actually the blue team by 20%. The blue team shot 10 of 22 from beyond the arc. That's 45.5%. And they ended up shooting, I believe, in the second half, 3 of 8 for 37%. So they started off hot, cooled off just a little bit, but still 37.5% is really, really good from beyond the three-point line as a team. And then you look at the white team, they ended up shooting 25%, 6 of 24 from beyond the arc. I think the two most notable shooting performances in this game that we have to discuss on the negative side of things is Reed Sheppard, who shot 3 of 11 for the blue team, had 7 rebounds, 5 assists, only 1 turnover, and 1 personal foul. Played well outside of shooting in this game. And then Antonio Reeves was 6 of 19 and 1 of 9 from beyond the arc. Could not find his shot all day long. And again, like I said earlier, Dillingham's not going to go 14 of 23 in a game. He's not going to shoot that well in the future consistently, at least I don't think, but he's going to play well. Antonio Reeves is not going to go 1 of 9 from beyond the arc in upcoming games consistently. That's not going to happen. And I also don't think that Reed Sheppard's going to shoot 3 of 11 consistently. Some of these shots I felt like were a little rushed in the scrimmage, and those two were taking a lot of them. Some other notable performances here. Justin Edwards, although a slow start on offense, once again, like he had during the Global Jam, only shot 1 of 5 from 3. He ended up finishing with 26 points, 10 rebounds on 11 of 18 shooting. He did have only 1 assist to 6 turnovers. Going to need to clean that up just a little bit. But again, I don't think that any of these major outliers here as far as stats go are going to be big-time concerns this upcoming season. Also, only a combined 20 turnovers between these two squads, and Justin Edwards has had 6 of those. Let's see. Reeves did have 17 points despite shooting very poorly. DJ Wagner shot 9 of 20. Just some really crafty moves getting to the basket and finishing in this one. Was 1 of 2 from 3. Not a big three-point shooter, but man, to have 6 assists to only 3 turnovers, 7 rebounds, and then those 25 points. And man, this Kentucky backcourt is going to be really good this season. With those two leading the way, Dillingham and Wagner, Reeves, I think, is going to shoot significantly better in the regular season. Tre Mitchell, also somebody else we have to talk about here in the front court. 14 points, 5 of 8 shooting, 2 of 4 from 3. He had 14 rebounds, which led everybody. He had 3 assists, 3 turnovers, 2 personal fouls in 40 minutes. And I think that's where we need to kind of cap it here. Tre Mitchell is going to be Kentucky basketball's starting center this season for what could end up being the majority of the non-con slate. I think we need to prepare ourselves for something. And I have this in my notes. What did we talk about at the end of March and heading into April about this upcoming year for the team? When there were kind of some negative things going around where Kentucky didn't have anybody returning on roster pretty much and everything was up in the air, I continued to preach that this team is going to be a fun squad to watch. They are. They've got really good individual players on this team, and I think that the chemistry on offense has been surprisingly quick to develop. But I think this team, the words I've been using are highlight reel. I think that this team is going to be a highlight reel. But what I don't know if they're going to be is necessarily a complete defensive team. I don't know if they're going to be able to protect the rim as good as they are, as well as they may want to this upcoming season. And that's with Ugonna Onyenso and Aaron Bradshaw back in the lineup. I think that those two are going to be very good. I think that they are going to significantly help. But for the majority of this first third of the year, with Tre Mitchell at that center spot, I don't know if Kentucky's going to be as dominant as some of us may hope for them to be. So I want to kind of sit here and say for a second, brace yourselves for maybe some frustration at the beginning of this season for the majority of the non-con slate. The team is going to be fun. They're going to be a highlight reel. They're going to score, and the nights that they don't score may end up being really frustrating because of what you see on the other end of the floor. Just need to brace yourself for the possibility of that happening. I'm not telling you it's definitively going to happen. Tre Mitchell may end up being a monster for Kentucky. I'm just saying there is a legitimate cause for concern there. Monitor it. Brace yourself for it. If it doesn't go the way that we want it to, that's just the way that it is. If you're able to beat some of these better teams like Kansas and Miami and North Carolina, and then Gonzaga later on, very, very impressive with the current state of the roster without all of your players healthy. So those are my thoughts on the blue and white game. If you have any questions, any thoughts about the blue and white game, you can absolutely leave them in the YouTube comments below. I want to get to your bold predictions for this upcoming season. I've got 4 of them here for you today. Before we get to those, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is really simple and easy to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. And with quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types, it's what makes Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. And I've talked about this with Prize Picks, and I love this, and I think this is really cool. They have this reboot policy. So your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So for NFL games and top 25 college football matchups, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is then rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with injury insurance, which I think is very cool. So you can go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. That is Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, continuing along here on the Monday edition of Locked On Kentucky, Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. Really appreciate you guys making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. I want to remind you guys, I'm about to go through, I believe, our 4th or 5th installment of these bold predictions here. If you have any bold predictions for Kentucky basketball season that's about to start here, please leave them in the YouTube comments below. You can also hit me on the socials on Twitter or on X, whatever you want to call it, at LockedOnUK. Message me there, tag me in a tweet, give me a bold prediction, and then I will rate it on a scale of 1 to 10 here on the show. Took this idea from Josh Pate. Pate, if you ever see this, deal with it. Okay, so we've got 4 bold predictions here on the show. The first one comes from Isix, who has given us 2 bold predictions already this offseason. This is his 3rd. He says, bold take, Ugonna Onyenso is a better defensive prospect than Aaron Bradshaw and will be looked upon as the better overall prospect and player even with Bradshaw's undeniable offensive game. In conclusion, I have Ugonna Onyenso over Aaron Bradshaw for DPOI. I agree with the majority of Isix's statement here, and I'm going to give this a 5.5 on the boldness scale. I believe that on a scale of 1 to 10, 5.5 is how bold this take is, that Ugonna Onyenso is a better defensive prospect than Aaron Bradshaw. I completely agree with that part. I would put that part at a 0. I think that Aaron Bradshaw is going to be Kentucky's best, Ugonna Onyenso is going to be Kentucky's best defender this upcoming season. He's put on weight. He's developed this offseason. He's really shown, I think, a step forward whenever it comes to, again, like I said, the development aspect of his game this offseason here. I'm very, very glad that he's back after considering leaving UK earlier in the year. I think he's going to be one of Kentucky's best defensive players that they've had come out of the program in quite some time. He's going to show that individually. I think he's going to record a lot of great numbers. Go back to what we said a minute ago. Is Kentucky going to be the best team overall defensively? Are they going to be able to protect the rim as well as they would like to this upcoming season? Not quite sure if it's going to be the team defense that's going to be as strong as Ugonna Onyenso's, but I think him individually, he's going to have a really good year. And then on top of that, Bradshaw, I think, is a very good prospect. I love his offensive game. I love the fact that he can step out and shoot the 3 a little bit as well. Very excited to see what he looks like in this lineup. That's something we've not gotten to see at all this in any scrimmage at any point this offseason. None of that in the Global Jam. None of it during the blue and white game. None of it during Big Blue Madness. We haven't gotten to see any of it. So I think that Bradshaw right now on paper is one of the more exciting prospects that Kentucky has to offer. Obviously, Zvonimir Ivisic also up there as well. I think that Bradshaw is going to end up being the better prospect. So that's where I differ here from Isix is as far as the boldness on this. That's where the 5.5 comes from, where it kind of splits it down the middle. I completely wholeheartedly agree with him. I think that Ugonna is going to be in contention for maybe SEC DPOI. I think that's very possible. I think that he could also be one of Kentucky's best defensive prospects that they've seen in quite some time, maybe since Boogie Cousins or Anthony Davis, whatever have you there. If you want to go back to the early Cal years, I think that you could point out a number of players that were very good on defense that Ugonna will be comparable to. Willie Cauley-Stein, another one there as well. But I think that Aaron Bradshaw is the better overall prospect. Even in Isix points out here, even with his undeniable offensive game. I like this take. I love having bold predictions like this that are the positive ones, but I think that it is pretty bold to say that Bradshaw will be Onyenso will be the better overall prospect despite Aaron Bradshaw and his well-rounded game. So I'm going to give that one a 5.5 on the boldness scale. Definitely not the highest boldness take that we've had here on the show. I do like it, though. I like that take from Isix. Here's another one that we've kind of talked about a little bit here recently. This is a bold prediction that apparently a lot of you seem to have. This is the 4th or 5th person that I've seen either on Rupp Rafters or on YouTube talk about this one individual player and how they will contribute significantly, they believe, to this team. Pad SFS07 said, or it could be Pads FS07, says Thiero, Dawe Thiero, will end up starting most of the season for Kentucky. So let's, before we give a boldness take on this, let's talk about where that could end up being. So Kentucky basketball right now is down Aaron Bradshaw, who will play power forward for you. They are also down Ugonna Onyenso, who will play center for you. That is forcing your hybrid power forward, your 4-5, to play your 5, and then at the power forward spot, you're going to have to do some funky things, I think, at different points this upcoming season. You've got a couple of different options of how you could handle that there. And I don't know if Kentucky's going to, kind of slide possibly Jordan Burks down there to power forward. I don't know if they're going to let Justin Edwards do it or if they're going to let Dawe Thiero be the starter there at power forward this season. I think that that's a very realistic possibility for the beginning of the season for the non-con slate. I think that you could absolutely see a Thiero work his way either into that rotation or just start flat out. I'm looking here across the board to see if I can find literally anybody else that would be in contention outside of those three players to begin the year. It's Burks, it's Thiero, and it's Edwards. I really do think right now that that's kind of what you're looking at. And I understand that Zvonimir will be a part of this rotation, and you will have moments where you see him at the 5 out there. I don't really know if he's going to contribute a whole lot this year in terms of minutes. So this is a prediction that may end up being true, that Thiero, because of injury, starts at power forward for Kentucky for the majority of the year. And he's actually not a player that we talked about with the blue and white game. Take a look at these numbers from Dawe Thiero. 26 points on 10 of 13 shooting. He only shot 50% from the line, 3 of 6 from the line, 10 of 13 shooting from Dawe Thiero. 26 points, 9 rebounds, 2 assists. He's not going to be distributing the ball a lot, but let me tell you what he's going to be. A force to be reckoned with. And let me also tell you this. If Dawe Thiero goes out and he plays starter minutes at power forward, and he's able to give you consistently, like every other night, 3 of 5 shooting from beyond the arc, if he's able to do that, which he did in this blue and white game, that's an all-conference type of player. Absolutely second or third team all-conference type of player. If he gets starter minutes and he's able to shoot as efficiently as he did in the blue and white game, that's a very good player that you have at power forward. You cannot be mad at that. You may be frustrated a little bit with the lack of height there. Kentucky's going to have to deal with that for the majority of the season until Bradshaw and Onyenso both come back. So I think that Thiero starting most of the season could very well happen if the injuries persist for Kentucky. I think that we could talk ourselves into that being okay because of how he may be able to bring a little bit more on offense than we expected, on top of his already impressive defensive and physicality, or defense and physicality. I'm going to give this one a 6.5 on the boldness scale that Thiero ends up starting most of the season. This very well could happen if Kentucky's rotation ends up not being 100% for half of the season or more. So I think that Pads FS07 may be onto something here. 2 interesting bold predictions here to start things off here in our 5th installment, I think, of bold predictions. We've got 2 more here and more positivity from you guys. A couple of these coming from the Rupp Rafters message board. Really appreciate the responses that they gave over there. These are some. This first one actually is pretty bold from Hagenhall, and then the second one to do with role players maybe stepping up like Thiero. I want to dive into those in just a second. Before I do that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at Athletic Brewing. I want to tell you guys about the Game Changer of the Week, brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company, because much like players like Dawe Thiero, who could be complete game changers for Kentucky basketball this upcoming season, Athletic Brewing has completely changed the non-alcoholic beer game. They make non-alcoholic beers that actually taste really good. Dawe Thiero, like I just said, could end up being a legitimate starter at power forward for Kentucky basketball this upcoming season if injuries persist. And I think he could end up playing pretty well. He could end up doing well if he is able to stay efficient like he was in the blue and white game. Athletic Brewing makes non-alcoholic beers that, like I said, actually taste good. They are full of flavor and well-crafted, just like full-strength beer. And they brew over 50 styles of craft non-alcoholic beer, including IPAs, Goldens, sours, and more on top of that. They are the fastest-growing non-alcoholic brewery in the United States, so you need to go ahead and get on board. You can find Athletic Brewing Company's non-alcoholic brews at a store near you, or you can buy them online at athleticbrewing.com. First-time customers can use code LOCKEDON to get 15% off their first online order. That is code LOCKEDON at checkout for 15% off at athleticbrewing.com. It is near beer, really good stuff. Exclusions and conditions apply. All right, wrapping up the Monday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you once more. If you've not subscribed to the show already, I would really appreciate it if you went ahead and did so. Getting closer to 5,600 subscribers. Let's keep pushing, guys. I'm so thankful for everybody that has subscribed to the show thus far on YouTube. If you're listening on podcast as well, leave a review. Let me know what you think about the show. I would greatly appreciate that as well. Hagen Hall, 1999, as I mentioned before. This is a really interesting, bold take. This may be the boldest take on this show because it does not get more bold than this. He says, quote, "This is the best Kentucky team since 2017. This time they will finish the business and win number 9. Hagen Hall is going straight to the as about as bold as you could possibly go here, and saying Kentucky basketball is going to win their 9th national title. In case you don't know, in 2017, Kentucky went 32-6. It was that really good year that ended with a heartbreaking loss to North Carolina in the Elite Eight. That was just tough. As a 2 seed, it's one of the best backcourts Kentucky's had in Malik Monk and De'Aaron Fox. Isaiah Briscoe ended up playing pretty efficiently. Bam Adebayo was great. Guys like Derek Willis shot really well coming off the bench. And then you had guys like Dominic Hawkins, and then Wenyen Gabriel, Isaac Humphries. You had all these different players that you were really excited about, and it was a good team. It was a very, very, very good team. I was really hoping Kentucky would be able to push past UNC in that Elite Eight game. Tough break for the Wildcats. They've got, though, I think, probably their best backcourt since that team. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's one of the best backcourts they've had in the Calipari era. On paper, it's one of the best that they've had in his era. But Hagen Hall just straight up saying, we're going to win the national title this year. That's my bold prediction. Go ahead and book it. I'm going to give this one a 9.5 on the boldness scale. I think that this is very bold. I think Kentucky is very young. They do not have a lot of height to begin the season. I think that's something that we need to consider here when talking about Kentucky making an NCAA tournament run is their seeding, and their seeding is determined by their resume. If you are not able to pick up wins against Kansas, against North Carolina, against Miami, if you're not able to get it done against Gonzaga, if you start off the SEC slate slow with some disappointing losses because you just don't have everything together, you're going to be seated in a spot that you will end up being uncomfortable with. And if you end up getting that 1 or 2 seed, obviously things are going to be a little bit easier, and you are going to be more than likely favored to make a run, especially with the draw that you're going to end up getting. So I think Kentucky has the opportunity to do that. I think that their youth this year may hold them back from making an extremely deep postseason run to that Final Four, to that national championship. That's where I'm sitting right now. But it very well could happen. It's just going to be very difficult. It's really difficult to predict who's going to win the national championship. I know that there's like a handful of teams that you could see it possibly being, but just want to keep in mind here, San Diego State and Florida Atlantic were the ones that really made runs alongside I believe a 5 seed in UConn this past season. So don't really know what's going to happen here in the NCAA tournament. Very hard to predict. Kentucky basketball with their youth and inexperience would be a very fun story to talk about, how Cal was able to kind of climb back to the top. But they're going to have to show a lot. I think a lot of growth, a lot of progression between now and the time that they tip off in their first round of 64 game. And I think there's not a lot of disagreement with that. I don't think that this coaching staff nor these players would disagree with that. That there's going to have to be a lot of growth and development before they can sit there and comfortably say, hey, we're going to go win this thing. We're going to go win this whole thing. They also need to get healthy, which is something I don't think anybody would disagree with. All right, the final bold prediction here on the show today comes from Dreadlocks. Reed Sheppard and Jordan Burks will play key roles. He did not define how long they would play key roles for the Kentucky Wildcats this upcoming season, so I'm going to put this one at a 5. I think Reed Sheppard, all around, I think he's a pretty good player. I think he plays good defense. I think he's going to be a fun distributor as well. He can also get his own shot. He's got a very solid all-around game. Not the flashiest player in the world, but I think that he's pretty good. He is pretty solid. backing up DJ Wagner and Antonio Reeves there at the 1 and the 2, playing with Rob Dillingham probably whenever they sub in. I think that Sheppard's going to be a good player this year. I think he's going to get his minutes. I think he's earned that this offseason. He's really proven himself to be a good player. And then Jordan Burks may end up having to play a lot for Kentucky. I mean, this is something that Kentucky didn't necessarily want to have to do, I don't think, to begin the season. Jordan Burks playing well in the blue and white game is kind of promising to see him kind of fit into his role well, better than it was in the Global Jam. He's not going to be dropping 20 every night, I'll tell you that, but he's going to have to, I think, contribute and play a key role for this squad for the first third of the year. So I'm going to put this one, let's see, at like a 5. Yeah, I think that's fair to say that that for the SEC schedule, Kentucky is going to probably, because they'll be healthier, rotate different players in. And I think Reed Sheppard will be more of a factor here when that happens than Jordan Burks. But I don't think that this is a crazy take at all. I think that's going to have to happen to an extent to begin the season. So put a 5 on the boldness scale. A lot of takes that I really like today. Again, if you've got any bold predictions, you can leave those in the YouTube comments below. And I think that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at LockedOnUK. You can follow me on Twitter at LanceDawe_, and you can follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave them in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.